all the time. That's unique in the world. That's part of our strength. And then, of course, our cultural values. I know I'm not supposed to talk about cultural values anymore, but we're going to talk about them. There are very simple truths. In life, the truth is the truth, whether people want it to be the truth or not. The truth is that human beings, children, grow up to be more productive, by and large, when they are raised in strong, stable, and loving homes. That has been a strong part of America's success. Our economic system, our political system, our cultural values. But embedded in all three of those has been the one thing we have relied upon consistently as a nation, and that is great leadership. Beginning with our founders, by the way, who didn't have to do what they did, who risked everything. Forget about the fact that they could lose an election and go home in disgrace. No, no, no. These people's families could be killed. Their properties were and could be confiscated. Everything they had in the world could be ripped from them. They could be executed, hanged, tarred, feathered, or worse. It happened all the time. And yet there were men who, and I say men because at that time they were all men, living in one place, at the same place at the same time, who were willing to risk all of that because they so strongly believed in values and ideas that today too many of us take for granted. Our tradition of leadership in this country continues through what today we know as the greatest generation, who we commemorate their service today through D-Day. But it's well beyond that. A generation raised during the hard times of the Great Depression, who did what had to be done, who put the best interest of their country ahead of their own ambitions, their own desires, because they knew what had to be done and they did it. Even very recently, and people forget this, but even in the early 80s, despite their great differences, Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill put aside partisanship and worked on serious public policy matters for our country, many of which ultimately led to the fall of the Berlin Wall and the Soviet Empire and made the world a better place. But now each of the underpinnings of our greatness is under attack. Our political system increasingly forgets the protections of our Constitution. Increasingly, separation of powers in this country no longer is separated. And there's the growing notion in our country that our elected representatives in our republic need to be supervised by super legislators wearing robes on federal courts. There's this growing notion that somehow the people who stimulate and grow the economy and create jobs are senators and congressmen and the president. Not the guy with a napkin or the business plan on the napkin or the lady with the business out of her garage. Not each of you that get up and work 6.5 days a week, 12 hours a day, pursuing a dream, creating jobs for yourself, for your family, for your employees, and opportunities for others. And so that's why increasingly our government owns auto dealers. Increasingly our government owns automakers. By the way, if you're going to buy an automaker, you should buy one that makes money.
Shows you how dumb they are.
Yeah. You should have bought Toyota, you know. And even our cultural truths are being attacked. And not in the traditional ways that some people talk about. I'll leave that to others. It's important to talk about it, but they do a better job than I do. It's this simple. There are people today who believe that somehow America is going to be the first civilization in the history of the world that is going to be able to produce successful, productive human beings without parents. That somehow, by spending more money on books and schools and whatever else, we are going to somehow be able to replace the role of the family in the lives of people. And that's part of that is government, but most of that is cultural, and it's important that we speak out about that again. Those are the underpinnings of our success. Each of those are under attack, but none in a more devastating way than the lack of leadership in government today. The lack of leadership in government today is a problem. I'll be very blunt with you because I need to be. Politics today is dominated by manipulators of public opinion. Politics today is dominated by people that will say anything and be for anything and do anything to win the next election. Politics today is dominated by people who believe that politics is a sport, like college football, where you basically put on a jersey, you paint your face your team's color, you go out there and fight, and then really the only reason why we're here is to win the next election.
Amen.
And there are consequences to that. And there are consequences to the lack of leadership in politics. And there are consequences to leaders that will say or do or be for anything in order to get elected at the expense of our future. And the consequences, we're facing them. The consequences are a politics that's incapable of solving a problem. You cannot name a major problem we have solved in this country in close to 20 years. The issues we faced in 1992 are with us yet today. In fact, some of them are much worse.
Yes.
We have not solved a major issue in American politics in 20 years. In fact, today we are besieged in both parties by leaders that are willing to destroy the future, annihilate the future, in order to get through the next election in the next 2 years. The tragic consequence of all of this, wrapped in a nice little bow, is very simple. My 4 children, oldest is 9, youngest is not even 2, are on the verge of being the first generation of Americans in our history who will inherit a country worse off than the ones their parents had. And I'm here to tell you today that I'm running for the U.S. Senate because I know that it does not have to be that way.
That's right.
That result is not inevitable. That result is not inevitable. If we once again become a movement and a country of ideas, real meaningful ideas, not slogans or stuff that fits on the back of a bumper sticker, the kinds of things that it takes time and hard work to bring to fruition. Not the things that will poll 70% the first time you present them to people. Things that may only poll 40%. But as you get out there and talk to people about it, it will grow. There was a time when our leaders did that. There was a time when our leaders stood for ideas that weren't necessarily popular at first, but they invested time and energy and sometimes years, like Ronald Reagan invested years in talking to the American people about the evils of runaway government, until victory was finally ours, and a great era of American prosperity was born from it. Ideas like what? Ideas like returning and respecting our Constitution once again. About accepting the notion that our Constitution is a special document, that when we adhere to it, and the limits that it places on government, it has produced great freedoms and prosperity, unlike any in human history. That's not a very novel idea, that's a simple one, but I wanted to start with a simple one. How about ideas like a balanced budget amendment and significant tax reform? The balanced budget amendment is self-explanatory, but tax reform is important to outline. I'm going to confess to you today, I am a fan of the fair tax. If there's a fair tax or some flat tax that you can fill out on one sheet of paper, our country, more than tax cuts, I have no problem with tax cuts, but cutting taxes in a crazy system, which is what we have, a crazy tax system, isn't going to get us where we need to be. We need to become a movement of tax reformists, of people who understand that our IRS tax code isn't just too high, it's broken. If I were to ask someone, design for me a tax code that will discourage job creation and encourage people to take their headquarters and their manufacturing plants overseas, what would you give them? You would give them this. And yet, and by the way, it's a system that's unfair. It's also unfair, because here's the only people who win in our tax system. The people that don't pay any taxes, and the people who can hire lawyers and accountants to get them around these taxes. And in between are the rest of us. I'm not Warren Buffett, and neither are you. We don't get to pick how we get our money, where we get our money, when we get our money. We don't get to hire lobbies to create loopholes designed just for us. I just get a paycheck every 2 weeks. Now I pay myself the paychecks. I have to pay the employment tax, the FICA, the MICA, the CHICA, all the other items. We just have to pay them. But there are people that are rich enough and powerful enough to hire lobbies to create loopholes for themselves, and then lawyers to exploit those loopholes. That's wrong too. And then sometimes it's also a tax system that lends itself to class warfare. We need a tax reform agenda. The third thing I think we should be is about speaking out about the social and moral realities of our life. It's very simple. Here's what